Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwinny Poo, in this episode 469. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyFan89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing?
Doing all right.
Wow, that sounded really positive over there.
I'm still drinking my coffee, man.
Well, I guess it's a little too early to be drinking anything else. Maybe. I don't know. Somewhere in England.
Never too early, Schwinn. Definitely not March
Somewhere in
17th. So,
well, we're not here to talk about our drinking habits. We're here to talk about the Knicks. We're going to do that. But before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First being that the Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may watch this podcast. If you are, and you have done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that hosts every Friday at the Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord. The conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Home, my solo pod, where I rant that makes you even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Moreno, one of the best in the business. And you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it, is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Mechkos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. That's going to a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially goes to the podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. The Knicks won 110-105 against the Sixers. I would like to call this like a nice bounce back win after getting completely demolished by the Cavs on Friday night, followed up by at least an opening quarter destruction at the hands of the Celtics. They showed signs of life against Boston, but far too little, far too late. They win yesterday. I don't really know what to say at this point because I just am watching this team and it feels like they are trending down and very little is being done to stem the issues. We've talked a lot about the defense, and obviously that is the side of the ball where they've had their biggest issues this season. But I think offensively, it's not. Look, I'll just read this off. So from the start of the season until through the end of 2024, the Knicks ranked 16th in three-pointers attempted per 100 possessions. They were 5th in assists per 100 possessions, and they were 2nd in offensive rating. Since January 1st, the Knicks rank 30th in three-pointers attempted per 100 possessions, 16th in assists per 100 possessions, and 7th in offensive rating. This just speaks to an offense that's becoming, to me anyway, increasingly reliant on Brunson and Cat individually carrying them to some degree. We've talked a lot about Mikal Bridges. I think that there is a lot of culpability on his part in terms of some of his shot selection, some of his unwillingness to get to the rim. And that's all fair. And obviously we know he's struggled, shooting threes from above the break this year. I think it's fair to be critical of him for all of that. But where I have a lot of sympathy for him is I don't see it. Yesterday comes out. He has 19 points in the first quarter. I mean, he's on fucking fire. And I think it's interesting to go back and watch his kind of highlights from yesterday. Among those 19, the 19 points he scores in the first quarter, Do you feel like how much of that do you feel was, oh wow, this is a nice set they're running for him, versus he finds space, makes himself available off the ball, and guys find him? Because to me, it's almost all of it is the former.
Yeah, I mean, you can see his chemistry with Brunson, especially in that first quarter. Brunson was just finding him all over the place, and Bridges knew where to be. So, it makes sense with the teammate history, but yeah, how much of that was emphasized or ran specifically for him? I'd have to say probably not a lot.
And so he's on fire, though, right? So, okay, he's on fire. Let's get him going. This is great, right? Cat's out, right? Cat's out. So we need to get some more pop anyway from somewhere. This is great. The guy that we paid 5 first-round picks for and pick swap, like all the shit that we constantly have to hear. Oh my God, we gave up all this from Mikal Bridges. Great. All the stuff that we gave from this guy's he's on fire. He's frying these guys. Let's get him going. If I remember correctly, I believe after the first quarter, he took 9 more shots the rest of the game. And I don't know if we ran a single play for him. I think we ran one play for him that was maybe 2 that were just basic high pick and rolls from the top of the key. That's about it. And this goes back to one of my biggest issues with what we've seen this season with him specifically, and you could mix in other guys too. Even when the offense is really, really flowing and beautiful and everybody, the ball is popping around, a lot of that was just predicated on the Knicks flowing off of initial advantage creation, usually in the form of a Brunson cat pick and roll, or, maybe a cat, if he's at the top of the key, the ball, everybody's spread out, guys are cutting. Teams are now playing way off Josh Hart, right? They're just sagging off the paint. The Knicks have struggled a bit in terms of, not a bit, but they've struggled quite a bit, actually, I should say, in terms of their, not just their volume from 3, as I noted, but they've been shooting more poorly from beyond the arc as well. But there is no layering to the offense. There is no, okay, we flow off this initial action and we immediately have something set up on the second side for Mikal Bridges. And I don't mean just a spot up or, a mismatch that you like, or just running him off a screen and that's it. Like, there is no second set that you're flowing into for him. And to me, that is probably the biggest failure of what we've, I guess, not done offensively this season, because I think there are real limitations to what he can do as a pick and roll ball handler in terms of his vision is not great. He's not really that adept at playmaking out of pick and rolls. But he is an efficient scorer out of pick and rolls. And if you put him on the second side, you kind of are alleviating the need for him to, 1, create from a standstill, and 2, theoretically, this is more of a play finishing action, given that there's going to be less time on the clock. And when I see the failure to incorporate, second side action in terms of like a DHO, pick and roll, whatever it may be, right? Pin downs, like you can name, 700 actions we can run through him. But it's not there. Like it doesn't exist. It's all just Brunson cat create. Hopefully they create an advantage. If not, the ball goes out to somebody, and then they'll either throw it back to Brunson or throw it back to Cat, or they will just have to create something on their own. And I just don't. I just think it's a really big failure, because, yeah, you did give up a really big price to him, but he is a more skilled scorer than we are kind of leaning into. I mean, you look at like the shots he does make, and again, I understand the frustration of like he's not getting the line enough, he's not attacking the rim enough, but like he's averaging 17.7 points per game on 49, 36, 73 splits. He's got a 56.9 effective field goal percentage. He's at just under 58 true shooting. Like, this is not an inefficient player. This is a player who's able to score at all three levels, even if, yes, you would like for him to be more consistent from above the, from beyond the arc and more willing to attack the rim. But there is a real value to the fact that he can score in the mid range and that he can create offense at that level. And yet there's no intentionality to get him involved. There's no real, like, how often do you watch games and you're like, oh wow, that's a really nice set they just ran for Mikal Bridges? It doesn't happen. And that is just a lack of creativity on Tibbs's part or willingness to kind of look, maybe there's some growing pains in terms of you're going to have to eat some inefficiency moving from Jalen Brunson running a pick and roll every possession to, whatever you want to do with Mikal Bridges, setting him up in ways that are less telegraphed, maybe, again, on the second side of things. Like, it's just, it's not there. And look, I'm not the most creative fucking basketball mind here. And I'm not presuming to know or suggest that Tom Thibodeau can't coach offense. I mean, the offense has been excellent the last few years, and he deserves credit for that, and I've credited him plenty for that. But if there is a limitation in what he is capable of, I do think it has been frequently keeping the supporting ancillary pieces kind of engaged, involved offensively. And Mikal Bridges, again, he's the clearest example of this to me. I mean, when we acquired him, I just real quick question, you would say he was acquired to be the third option, correct?
Yeah, and I mean he's been a pretty good third option.
He's been a pretty good third option. Do you know what his usage is this year?
20%.
Under 20%, 19.2. And just as an example of why, to me, that is just not, it kind of speaks to not using him productively or not being creative about how you're using him. RJ Barrett, in 3 seasons under Tom Thibodeau, these are his usages. Sorry, 3.5 seasons. 23.4, 27.6, 26.2, 26.5. Mind you, obviously, the last 2.5 seasons, he played with, 1.5 seasons, I should say. Last 1.5 seasons in New York, he played with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. But RJ Barrett is an easier player to simply draw up an action for, right? Because you can, we always used to frequently see them kind of set up, him on the wing, have him screen, and then he gets downhill going down to the middle. He's a bull, right? He's capable of just kind of bullying his way there through sheer force, whatever the results. Mikal Bridges isn't that guy. That's just not how he's going to play. So you had to be more creative in how you get him going, and there has to be more flow within the offense. And neither of those things, the flow was there, right, to start the season. That has really, really come down in the last month and a half, 2 months now, basically. But there really was never much in the way of intentionally getting him into preferred spots or running sets, designed specifically for him, action specifically for him. And that's I don't know. I think that's a pretty big concern and very worrisome because he doesn't. I'm not saying he needs to be at RJ Barrett what the level of usage that RJ Barrett was at while he was in New York, but I think for him to be under 20 and look, quite frankly, last night was ridiculous when you're watching a game where he goes off like he did in the first quarter, and then for the next 3 quarters we're seeing OG Anunoby and Precious Achua have carte blanche to try and ISO and create in positions and situations that are neither advantageous to them nor particularly beneficial to the team, all while Mikal Bridges is kind of staying on the floor. And the last piece I'll say about this, I don't know if you saw his post-game interview, Mikal Bridges, kind of weird energy. I don't want to say, I don't know. I mean, he might have just been disappointed in him, whatever. He talked about playing hard or whatever. Maybe he's disappointed in some of his play recently. I have no idea. But what I would also say is if I were him, that's a kind of game that I would not be super enthused about how things played out over the course of the game. Not obviously because the Knicks, not in the sense of the Knicks winning or whatever, but in the sense of if I'm not going to get kind of priority on a night like this, how do I fit in here? What is my role? What am I supposed to be doing? Meanwhile, he also has to selflessly, he bears the brunt of every bad result we have. Oh my God, we gave up all the picks for Bridges. This guy's dying on screens. He's this thing, he's that thing. And it's like, dude, it's kind of a thankless task of he has to defend what it's like the most frequently targeted play, right? Is putting him and Cat in pick and rolls. I think it's safe to say that Ariel Hukporti, whatever his flaws and all the learning experiences he will have as a rookie, is already a superior pick and roll defender to Karl-Anthony Towns, especially in drop coverage. Like you could see the difference that made. And I don't think it's just like, again, I've been as critical of Bridges as anybody for some of his defensive efforts, but I don't think it's all on him. And I think he is having to hear and bear all the criticism. And while that's ongoing, right, you're not supporting him defensively or you haven't been supporting him defensively because Cat at the 5 is, we already know the limits. We know what that comes with. And then offensively, you're not really prioritizing him in any clear, specific way. So I don't know what the plan is for him. I still don't. We're 58 games into the season, and that is highly concerning to me. Because when you're going to get into we've seen what happens, right? Against Boston, against Cleveland, against Oklahoma City, especially the more often we've seen those teams, like the second time around against all those teams, and a third time in the case of Boston, they're ready for what you want to do with Brunson and Cat. They know. They know what you want to do there. Can you offer different ways to attack them? Is there more to what you have in your arsenal than what we have? And we haven't seen it. And we're not seeing it because we're not trying to develop anything. And that's kind of I don't know. It's a issue as far as how I think we need to be looking to push the ceiling of this team going forward.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I'd want to ask. One, I think there's been I've heard, and I don't think they're contradictory, but I think it'd be interesting to get your perspective on what could be seen that way. There's been critiques of Tibbs' offensive system. On the one hand, I've heard we both criticized it's too rigid, doesn't give enough freedom to players. But we've also had the criticism that it doesn't get enough guys involved. He like this year especially, I've heard a lot of people say, he kind of just rolls the ball out and lets them run and, lets them play, right? One, do you lean closer to one of those assessments, or is it kind of a little bit of both? I think what kind of the synthesis of it is, if you listen to Phil Jackson talk, for example, he talked about those Bulls teams, and I know not exactly a favorite of our listeners here, Phil Jackson, for his time with the Bulls or for his infamous stint with the Knicks. But he would always talk about they didn't really call any set plays, right? But they had this structure, the triangle, within which players were free to make these reads, right? So you need some level of structure, and then within that freedom. Do you think both of those things are missing, or how do you kind of reconcile? Is Tibbs too rigid, or is he not calling enough set plays, or how would you kind of synthesize those two things?
Well, the triangle had multiple actions, so you could start with something.
But Phil wasn't calling it like on a play.
No. But that's the entire point. Is you go into a play with, okay, this is how they're defending it. So we know if a team is doing this, we do Y. If they suss that out, then we flow into this. And if they suss that out, then we flow that's how that system works. That's effectively what Golden State built off of. Really Pop built off of a lot of what was established in the triangle. This is how basketball works, right? Systems just build off each other. Rick Adelman, the corner offense is a variant of the triangle offense, and plenty of people have copied off of that. all the split cut stuff that you see that Mike D'Antoni really turned into a weapon. That's initially a triangle action, and then Golden State obviously made that even more weapon. Like they weaponized that by having Curry and Clay and kind of play off of Draymond, and they popped out for threes. And so like there's all kinds of ways to go about it. But what I see is I think Tibbs is very happy to have these guys move and all those things. Like it's not to me just static, stand in the corner and don't move. Like that's not the instruction. But I don't think there's a clear definition of what you want them to do on each play, which is why you see the guys like, okay, Cat and JB are running their pick and roll, and now, now Brunson is going to drive. But you'll see, and oh, wow, there's this, like, if I move baseline right here, I'll get a dunk or I'll get an opportunity to get a cut. You see this all the time where multiple guys are cutting into the same spaces. And that to me speaks of a lack of clarity in any kind of like specific designation of who is supposed to do what. And then on top of that, as we've seen, with teams kind of defending off of Hart in a way that is very significant, and he's allowing for it because one, he's not taking threes anymore. He's not hitting them when he is taking them, and he is like he's lost confidence in that shot to the point where you can see him almost like as soon as he has the opportunity to start to crash down or cut, he's taking it ASAP. And that might not be a problem against a lot of teams, but when you saw the first quarter against Boston, you could see the issues with that. And that's where it's different to me. It's not that I think Tibbs absolutely has structure to his offense, but I think that structure exists in a very, very primary action way. And then aside from that, I don't think there's much. And these are things that we've talked about for years. I think the difference was this year, these guys, right? Mikal, OG, Hart, and with the space, Cat affords you playing the five. To start the season, we saw kind of like they're just so intuitive and smart that they can play off of that, and then all of a sudden the ball is popping around. Again, teams have adjusted, switching more, playing off of Josh Hart, packing the paint very, very intentionally. The Knicks are also struggling with their 3-point shot, so that plays a part in it as well. So there's obviously multiple factors, but I just go like to me it's when you see such a stark kind of like first 2 months versus next 2 months, and this is not a small sample size. This is like 27 games we're talking about. It's not good. It's not encouraging, and it's worrisome because it doesn't seem to be getting better. Like I don't know what was better to you. And I understand Cat didn't play yesterday, so it's not the same dynamic. But what do you think was better about how they operated the offense yesterday after 2 days off between the Celtics game and the Sixers game? Like they should have had opportunities to practice. They didn't. And again, the Sixers are bad. They're a bad team. I think they either, I forget if they lost 8 in a row last night or if they had come in losing 8 in a row, whatever it was. They lost a lot of games in a row. And they're out Joel Embiid, right? Paul George has struggled all year. Tyrese Maxey has not had his best season. Like, but when I'm watching that, look, I'm always happy the Knicks win. But when I'm watching that game, I'm like, all right, I still see a lot of sloppy stuff on defense. I still see that for some reason Deuce McBride can only play 17 minutes. I still see Josh Hart getting away with brain dead stuff. I still see a lack of intentionality for Mikal Bridges touches offensively. I still see way too much of a green light with no consequences for whatever OG and Precious were doing last night. And all of that in totality is really concerning because it's not good offense, and I'm just not sure what to take of all of it. I mean, it's not good offense or defense. I mentioned defensive things too, and it's just slippage that we've seen over the last couple of months. Now they played a harder schedule, but to me, I don't like. We can talk about the limitation of their 3-point shooting personnel, forever. But you take 19.
This is probably the best shooting team that we've had under the Tibbs era, right?
At least in terms of percentage. Now, if you want to say they can't get the volume up like previous versions of the team because they don't have a second
Dante.
pull-up shooting threat like a Quickly or just a insane quick shot shooter like Dante, that's fair. And I don't expect them to be a high volume 3-point shooting team. Like, I'm okay with that. But to go from 16th, which is about average, right? I'm fine with average, to 30th, and now for the season they ranked 27th. So think about that. In 2 months, they went from 16th to 27th. In the last 2 months, over that time, they ranked dead last, and they're not dead last by like a 0.2, 0.3. They are dead last in threes per 100 possessions by like 2 full 3-point attempts. You can't, I'm sorry. You can play better defenses. You can tell me about how these guys don't have quick triggers, and I can agree with all of that. But don't fucking try to gaslight me and tell me that that's all there is to it and you can't do anything. Like, that's your responsibility as a coach, is to find ways to juice that and also to get these fucking guys to shoot more. Like, look, I think there's always a balance to be had of like, we need to get 3-point volume up versus letting guys play comfortably and within flow. Like, I don't mind him. I like Deuce getting mid-range jumpers because he's good at them. But I want him to pull the trigger more on and feel free and feel kind of, I don't want to say obligated, but the freedom to pull on threes, aggressive to pull on threes. I think it's okay to be like, hey, Josh, I know you're not the most comfortable behind the arc, but we need you to find a better balance of cutting, crashing the glass, and staying spaced and making yourself available for kickouts. We need to be like, hey, Jalen Brunson, we need you to take more pull-up threes. I'm sorry. It's the reality. We got it. We need you to take more. Cat, stop driving. Like, turn like 3 of your drives a game that are stupid into 3-point attempts. Mikal, stop dribbling into the mid-range when you don't need to pass up threes. Like, these are, and you're seeing slippage in these areas across the board, which is why it's concerning to me. That's why it's concerning to me. It's not like it's one guy. It's all these guys that you're seeing it with. And that is, I don't know. It's definitely a big concern of mine heading into the postseason, and it also is concerning because I don't know what Tibbs is doing to address it. Like, the most basic way to address it, right, would just be playing Deuce more. That's it. That would be like the most basic way to address it. He's up and down with that.
Defenses have also, I have to say, defenses have adapted to Deuce. Now, how much of that is not running stuff for him, I don't know. He's gotten, his shooting has gone down, but he's also just not getting good quality looks. And we've seen him just make chicken salad out of chicken shit with he can hit contested looks, but it's been a while since I've seen Deuce get 2, 3, 4 open threes. And I think because he's no longer a surprise in the scouting report, that's probably part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but I also just think there are times where I see him pump fake and go into a mid-range shot. And I'm like, why? Take the fucking 3. I think Deuce is a good enough shooter and he has enough track. I don't care what he's shooting this year. He has a long enough track record that he should be green light. Anytime you have any space from beyond the arc, shoot the fucking shot. Absolute green light. Mikal Bridges, anytime you have space beyond the arc, take the fucking 3. Be intentional about this stuff, right? That's my point. Is I pointed out this play from the Boston game where Mikal cuts baseline, OG has the ball, Mikal's curling around him, and there's nobody. No, his man, Boston has completely lost track of Mikal Bridges. There's nobody close to him. All he has to do is curl, get behind the line, and it's going to be a wide open 3-point attempt. He just kind of lazily comes around, takes the curl, and just settles for a 17-footer. And that stuff to me is when I see that, that feels like something that is not being drilled or emphasized enough. Hey, when you have 3-point opportunities, take them. Because I can't imagine. I mean, we know Dante wouldn't come off that and take a midi, right? He would definitely get to the corner quickly. Probably gets to the corner. Deuce probably gets to the corner. Brunson probably gets to the corner. It just feels like past versions of this team in general were much more disciplined in the shots they were taking. And this year doesn't feel that way, which makes me feel like they're having that they have less guardrails on them, which is not a bad thing, as long as there's still clear principles and points of focus. And I don't know. It feels like if there's a point of focus, it's simply getting to the rim, and not finding the balance that's correct. Because basically, if you look at the difference between 3-point attempt rate last year to this year, and then compare it to attempts at the rim this year and last year, it's basically an even trade-off. Shots to the rim are good. Threes are also good. I don't know. Like, find the better balance. And it's not that it's not possible. Like I said, for the first 2 months of the year, I mean, there were people complaining about it then, but I was fine with it. I was like, average is fine. They're a really good mid-range shooting team. They're a good 3-point shooting team, a really good 3-point shooting team, even if it's on lower value or volume. And they're doing a good job getting the rim. Like,
They have a lot of guys who are good at drawing fouls too, right? Brunson,
right.
Cat, Hart, even, right? So
right. So it's fine. Like, I don't need them to be fucking the Celtics, but I do need them to be taking more than they are. And I think it's like a reasonable expectation. And when it's not happening, you have to start looking at the coach. Like, I'm sorry, like it has to fall on him to a certain degree.
so I do want to get back to what I was talking about. So I think what you alluded to before is that, in offense, and offenses that maybe we were talking about, right? Triangle, Adelman's offenses, like in that kind of tree of offenses, there's many different reads. There's many different, depending on the defense, many different alternates and counters, right? Maybe counters is the word I'm looking for here, to how you want to run a play, right? Do you think those are just lacking in Tibbs's offense? Do you think it's because they run so slow that they're just like, if the initial action doesn't work, we're just going to flow to a Brunson ISO? Is it just a lack of nuance, maybe by design, because he wants to keep a slow pace anyway, and he wants to just, if you have all of these reads, you add more kind of variance and maybe more turnovers? Is that kind of a stylistic thing? Because that is the persistent thing where, look, RJ had higher usage than Bridges, but people are complaining about him not getting, I think everyone complained at some point about how RJ was being used, right? The people who were like, RJ's a star, were like, give him the ball and play Brunson off. I don't think I were ever there, but even both of us have probably complained, even at our lowest points with RJ's, why aren't we getting him in motion or on curls with, like getting the ball and like moving with the, on the catch, getting a screen and just getting him downhill where you can actually make some nice reads, empty side PNR. So is it that Tibbs needs to call those plays more? Is it just that by design we are just a one action and out team because he wants to limit turnovers and pace?
I think it's probably a lot of the latter. By the way, it's pretty funny that, like, and I agree, I was definitely part of the people at times that were like, oh, we need to get RJ more involved, but it's just funny, like, a lot of people that would argue that for RJ also don't care that Bridges is like not involved at all and actually involved less than RJ was. It's like, oh, well, give him 5 picks for this guy. Like, why isn't he just doing more shit? It's like, I don't know. Maybe it should tell you something, right? Like it's easier for Dante to play that type of lower usage role, because he's a nuclear shooter. It's just like, hey, you can run basic shit for him and have him space, and it's very easy to incorporate what he
He's
does.
going to have no problem getting shots up. That's the one thing we know about Dante, right?
It's easier to incorporate that, right? Mikal Bridges is a harder player to incorporate because his game is more diverse and it's more nuanced. It's more, like we talked about, mid-range, but like he has 3-point capability, but he's not some insane like distance shooter, quick trigger guy like that.
Well, do you think that's why he worked on that release?
I 100% think that. I 100% think it's why he worked on it.
Honestly, at times, this might be, people call me crazy for this. At times in transition, when he just gets it off, it does look kind of pretty, right? When he just catches it immediately. And then there's other times, like he had one yesterday where it was the trebuchet. So he's still dealing with some consistency. But sometimes you can kind of see the vision of why he like changed his shot, and it kind of looks good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have no problem with that. I think it's fine for him to work on that shot, and I think it's definitely intentional that he worked on it. Yeah, I think that it's here at the end of the day, we've seen Tibbs coach we've seen him in Chicago, we've seen him in Minnesota, we've seen him in New York. We've seen him in New York now for 4.5 years. He he trusts his best players. He thinks that is the most efficient and best way to get offense. And he will always focus on that more than finding ways to layer the offense, finding ways to leverage his off ball guys, aside from how they can benefit the primaries, right? It's not blending it together so much as what do you do to help Brunson exist? What do you do to help Randall exist? What do you do to help Cat exist? Like, that's kind of how he views it. And I mean, look, I think to play devil's advocate against my own argument here, like you'd be like, well, the Knicks offense has been fucking good for like 3 years now. And that's true. It has been good for 3 years. Is it good enough to win a championship? Is it good enough to play against the best teams and have enough in your bag, so to speak, that you're constantly presenting challenges to them versus, I mean, again, when we've played OKC the second time, Boston the second and third time, Cleveland the second time, has it felt to you like that we're challenging them defensively? And like, I mean, some of this is obviously if you play fucking Precious and Hart together against Boston, they're just going to, especially Precious at the 4, they're going to be like, all right, this is cake. But even aside from that, I mean, that kind of even makes the point, right? Because we saw Precious play the 4 against them and Hart, and it's like they're just crashing the glass on shots, and they're like, not like Precious is standing in the corner to nominally space the floor, but nobody gives a shit. Like, it's this is the stuff that is worrying, because I'm like, well, why? Like, why isn't there more to what we're doing? And I don't know. Like, I just I'm not watching an offense right now. And like, yes, I know it's still 7th in offense rating after from January 1st onward, but it doesn't feel like it's an offense that's 7th in offensive rating because you're really getting everybody to gel and everybody's participating. It feels like it's 7th in offensive rating because Brunson and Cat have been great, and Campaign gives you some needed bursts. And sure, at times, Mikal's gonna have a good game, OG's gonna have a good game, Josh Hart's gonna have a good game, but it doesn't feel like it's all coming together. It almost feels, I mean, it feels less good than it did for the first half of the season. So I don't know. It's, you can take that anywhere you want, but my gut instinct when I'm watching this team right now, and teams have bad. I mean, teams can have really good stretches, and there's ups and downs to a season. So maybe this is just a simple. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, and especially these last few weeks, they're just struggling right now. They're just in their own heads, and they'll snap out. Like, maybe that's all it is. Could be, but when I watch it, it feels like it's more than that. It feels like this team really needs to find counters and tweaks and adjustments and look for different ways to attack teams. Because if we're just going to do what we do, you might you can win a first round series. Maybe in a different conference, you can win a second round series. As it stands, I don't know how this team would be able to beat Cleveland or Boston in a series, aside from Mitch coming back, being awesome, and that fixing your defense to the level that you can get away with maybe not the best or most efficient offense ever, but a really good one that leaves some stuff on the table. Maybe that's the path, but obviously, if you're betting on Mitch, it's not a it's a bet fraught with risk.
Well, it also helps to some of the points you're making in terms of the offensive issues. He is a good offensive rebounder, right? That should. I'd be very interested to see him against Boston because he's been able to attack the offensive glass against Boston. I do think their bigs are a little bit better equipped to handle it. Now, and honestly, even a guy like Cornette has really improved and gives them a lot of energy. I do think like it's also just certain guys are going to have. I think with Bridges is adjusting to a new role, right? So in Brooklyn, he wasn't comfortable being the top dog. He's not really a guy that wants to force shots, right?
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of, even look, Grimes was not good yesterday for the most part. But you can see the energy he plays within a different system, right? He was constantly relocating. There were multiple times fakes a shot, gives and goes. It didn't always work out, and I thought the Knicks, Deuce and Brunson, sure, it was a little bit personal for them as well, having gone against this guy in practice. But you can see, right, that those kind of players, and look, I think you and I have both been very critical of Grimes. He did not handle much of what happened here with poise, but at the same time, it does seem like those kind of players do get shunted a little bit, and you want to be able to win it with as many ways as possible. Look, I mean, I think a lot of it is just the pace, right? And Tibbs at all costs does not want to lose the turnover battle. And it's worked for the Knicks, right? Keep your turnovers low, crash the offensive glass, get a lot of paint attempts, right? That's how they have won. And it's not even like the league is ahead of that. There's always different, but the thing is this, right? The league is always going to require, you want to win 4 series, you're going to have to face a diversity of opponents, both in terms of talent, yes, but also in terms of scheme. And you need to be able to win different ways. This roster, I think, especially when Mitch comes back, is built to win different ways. They should be able to run and gun. They should be able to, and we've seen it, right? We've seen, the first time Randall was out and Brunson played the Cavs, he dropped 48. And what was notable more than Brunson dropping 48, which at that time was still not like a ho-hum thing, right? It was, I think, one of his first really big 40-point outbursts on the Knicks. Just how fast they played, right? And how much Brunson was just saying, fuck it, I'm going to take more pull-up threes, right? And he was, and he had the Mitchell thing, which lingering from last year. Like, I don't think he would be averse to, I don't think this is a guy who's like, Harden, maybe not even the best example, right? But like who needs the ball all the time. But I do think like if it takes you 10, 15, and like that's the thing too, right? Like when they had that third quarter against Boston where they came back and made it close, a lot of it was Brunson really, really pushing the ball. I think that's a little bit of a priority, by the way. I don't know if everyone caught this, but there was a series of possessions where after making the basket, right, Philadelphia would stop the ball, right? You had Adam Bona get a dunk. He like places the ball on the floor and gets in the way. Brunson complains. There was another play where they stopped the ball for some reason, and then Brunson complains again. And then the third, and this was within a few possessions, so Nurse really had the third play. Andre Drummond throws down a dunk, which by the way was terrible defense from Precious. This is a 50% free throw shooter. You can at least put him on the line. Precious sidestep because apparently his fouls are super precious, even though you've been outperformed by Huck Porty all night. Trust me, buddy. We would rather see Drummond have to make 2 free throws than spare you a second foul. But on that play, Drummond kicks the ball up into the stands, and that maybe it was unintentional, but that kind of, and they got after getting the warning for delay of game, the Knicks actually got a technical, and of course Nurse did what he does best and complains. One of the most annoying coaches in the league, by the way. Smart guy, but Jesus Christ, does that guy whine? He makes Tom Izzo look like a Buddhist monk. I think Brunson really wants to play faster because I think he's starting to realize a lot of this, that like we do end up just devolving to ISO. And I think these games have, at least to him, been a wake-up call. And I mean, I think that we've talked about this a lot, just how much Brunson, if there is one positive I can take away from the last 2 games, or really, really, it's been going on since the end of January, so about a month now. We've always talked about this, right? In the beginning of the season, Brunson, he misses those, like he's not automatic on those mid-range shots. His decision-making is still being calibrated. Shooting comes and goes. He hasn't had a bad game in a while. And they play some really good teams. He is really the only guy who showed up in the Cleveland game or the Boston game. And that fadeaway buzzer beater, right? A lot of these floaters off the glass, stepping through the creative stuff that he was either missing on or just not able to get to early in the season. That's coming. And I think the level, like, of all the players, he seems to have that level of urgency. And sometimes, we can criticize Tibbs all we want, but all these guys, right? I don't think it's a coincidence, right, that Brunson has been the one who's the locker room leader, and Bridges came out and Brunson was looking for him, and Bridges was hunting shots as aggressively as he has all season. He's getting to the rim. You hope that within the locker room, those kind of things happen. And to the extent they might be constrained by pace, like we saw it that 21-22 season, right? There were so many times where the Knicks would jump out to a huge lead second half, especially when Quickly was running. There were times I remember Quickly just running down court, and then he looks at Tibbs and then just slows up, right? And then of course they would blow leads, right? Brunson has more autonomy than that. So I think it's, that's kind of the path forward. Play with more pace. Brunson leading by example, and kind of diversifying the offense, because as depressing as many of these games have been, the really at times the only encouraging thing was Brunson has, even with guys like Jason Tatum or Donovan Mitchell have been going off, often look like the best player on the floor, even amongst dark situations.
Yeah, I mean, people just don't understand how difficult the situation is for him. Like, there's no eye candy off the ball. You're not always playing. I mean, and modern defenses are just, even if you have 4 great shooters spotting up outside the arc, playing like 1-4 flat, they're just too good and organized for a guy to just capitalize in ISOs all the time with that. Like, it's just not, and especially, Brunson at his size, he's not like the speediest guy in the world or a high flyer, so he can't just like get to the rim. So he has to really kind of work for his shots in terms of his mid-range craft and whatever. Like what he's able to do is pretty special, and very specifically against those elite teams. It's pretty encouraging to see, because his first the 2 games against OKC were terrible for him. And he has had, I mean, in general, actually, in his career with the Knicks, he's done well against Boston. But he didn't have a good game that Saturday night, if I remember correctly. So whatever. Either way, it's good to see him have those good games. But they need more. I mean, and there's always like, oh, well, he could pass more here, he could do more there. And it's like he's got too much. You're asking him to decide everything. And it's like, I'll put it this way. When the Bills had Ken Dorsey, their offense was entirely like Josh Allen had to make reads based on coverages. So it was like, and I know that sounds stupid because you're like, well, that's how it works. No, but it's like everything was dictated on coverage. So if they're playing off, you and the wide receiver need to understand at the same time, this is the throw you have to make. So it's like a choice route, basically, is the idea. So based on how you're being covered, you and the receiver have to be on the same page of what route they're going to run, and then you throw it. And all of a sudden, his interception rate and turnover rate skyrocketed. And then Dorsey gets fired. They bring in a different offensive coordinator who's like, all right, we're going to simplify things. Like, we're not, like, this is not all just figured out on the fly ball. This is pre-designed stuff. We're going to have, you're still going to have options on plays, but we're going to stick to a script more often. This is not going to be, jazz improvisation on every possession. And all of a sudden, now he takes care of the ball like fucking he barely turned the ball over this year. And it's like, basically since Dorsey, since Dorsey left. And it's like, well, is that because he magically just now doesn't turn the ball over, or is there more to it than that? And that's what I think about when I watching the Knicks play, where I'm like, if everything is about figuring out how to play off of Jalen Brunson and figuring out how to play off of Cat, you're asking too much. Like, you're asking way too much of 3 other players in the court, whoever they are. It's not just the starting wings, right? It can be Deuce. It can be fucking Campaign. It can be whoever. Doesn't matter. You're asking way too much. And then on top of it, you put a player like Precious in that situation, who is not the most intuitive player to have ever played basketball, okay? To be kind. And is not the most aware player. And, like, it exacerbates his issues too, which is why you feel that offensive struggle so often when he's in the game. And it obviously gets worse when he plays down, right? When he plays at the 4 instead of the 5. So that's what it really comes down to for me, is like, you're asking so much of Jalen Brunson, very specifically, more so than Cat, to constantly, like, he has like so many responsibilities on any given play. Bring the ball up. Okay, initiate the offense. Like, make sure everything is set up. Initiate the offense. Try to create an advantage. Now you have to make the decision. Are you going to look to score, or do you have to spray it out because the defender's helping? And that's like, there's not anything that you do that's often just like easy read, automatic read type stuff. It's him having to read the floor and make decisions based on everything the defense is doing. And even within that, it's based on, well, I hope him and Mikal Bridges are on the same page here. I hope Josh Hart's seeing this the same way that he's seeing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he knows if they're here, that I have this open. Or if this guy is there, this will be happening. And so I can pop it over there. It is just constant, like, I can't imagine how hard it is for him. And I don't want to act like I'm saying Tibbs does nothing for him or something. Like, he's had his best seasons as a pro under Tom Thibodeau. So clearly it's not like Tom Thibodeau's setting him up to fail constantly. But do I think that Tibbs is maximizing him? No, I don't. Do I think that Tibbs, I'll actually rephrase that. Tibbs might be maximizing Jalen Brunson. He might be maximizing Karl-Anthony Towns. But I do not think that he is leveraging those guys to maximize other players and the supporting cast specifically. And that's where I feel like he's leaving stuff on the table, because the offensive rating can be great and all these things can be true. But do I think that going into a series against Cleveland or Boston and the plan is like exactly what it's been is sufficient? I don't. And I just don't, I don't see it. I'm sorry. I don't see it. Like, just as a very, very basic example, the Mavericks last year, they have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, right? That's a higher level of shot creation than the Knicks have and have ever had on their roster. Certainly in the Tibbs era, probably ever, right?
They went Clyde. They had Clyde and Pearl. Come on.
But like, these guys go into the NBA Finals against Boston, and they could not fucking score. They couldn't score. Okay? And that's with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Why should I believe that the Knicks are going to go into a series? And we would agree with this, right? That the Mavs front court even last year was obviously good, right? Lively, Gafford, PJ Washington. It's a good front court.
Yeah.
So why would I believe that the Knicks, with Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, are going to play Boston and all of a sudden they're going to succeed offensively at a high clip? I don't see that. I think you need more to your offense than our two guys are better than what you can throw at us, and that's that. Like, that's me. That's just how I feel about it. I don't know what the evidence is to suggest otherwise. It certainly isn't based on anything we've seen this season playing these teams. And that's it. Like, do I think Tibbs is the worst coach ever? No, obviously not. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a damn good coach. He's done a really good job with this franchise and helping turn us around. But is he the guy that's going to be able to get this collection of talent and have it reach a higher level? Because if I told you in May of 2024, actually the best version of this Cavs team doesn't really need to make any major changes, you'd have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, Mobley and Allen, that can't work together. You don't space it. You don't space the floor. And yeah, we can sit here and talk about, well, they were young and Mobley and Garland could still make individual leaps. That's fine. We can, nobody would dispute that. But what we cannot pretend now in retrospect is that even if we accommodated for individual improvements from those guys, the consensus opinion was him and Garland and Mitchell in the backcourt. It's not a clean fit. And Mobley and Allen, I don't know. Mobley's long-term futures at the 5. How do you play these guys together? Neither of them is going to be a volume 3-point shooter. The consensus opinion, even when they hired Kenny Atkinson, whatever, coming into the season was not. Yeah, this team will probably be the best offensive basketball. They'll probably take threes at a top 5 volume clip, and they'll probably be the best shooting team in the league. I don't think anybody would have said that shit. Nobody would have said that shit. That's why Kenny Atkinson is going to run away with Coach of the Year, and he deserves to, because he has taken the talent that he had and changed the perception of it from it is really good, but not a contender. Got to make some real changes here, to contender, no question. And maybe there are questions, but you get my point. And my belief is I don't think Tibbs is going to be able to do that, which doesn't, again, this does not make him a bad coach. But you have to be a great coach to win championships. You have to be a creative coach to win championships. You have to explore and use the full diversity of your options on a roster to win championship, especially, very specifically, I'm talking about this modern era of the NBA that we're in. Back in like 2005, you could just toss it to Timmy or toss it to Kobe, and that was that. Can't do that. Like, yeah, of course, in moments you're going to have to, but it's got to be more than that. And I don't know. I don't see that. I don't see the work being put in to achieve that. It seems, again, Tibbs's focus has always been win the game in front of you, right? Win the game in front of you, win the game in front of you, win the game in front of you. And maybe you get better at executing the details of what you're trying to do, your scheme overall, but it's not like experimentation to see what you have and try new things and see if this thing is better than that thing, and how does this match up against that. And that's where I don't know. I just feel like they're not at the level tactically and creatively that they need to be against the top teams. And yeah, maybe part of that, I mean, not maybe, definitely part of that is they need to replenish depth, right? We've all talked about that, and I think that's a pretty fair opinion to have for sure. But there's more. Like, it's more than just we need more talent. I don't think he's pushing the ceiling of the talent we have, and that goes for both ends of the floor. I just think I prefer to talk about the offense today because we after the fucking we've talked about the defense plenty, right? That's its own thing, and the reliance on drop coverage and all those type of things. But as good as the offense is, I don't see it matching up.
I mean, it was a telling look. This is not to pile on Tibbs. He's got plenty of advantages that I think other coaches don't. But it was telling. I can't believe it was one of the Hot Hand Theory guys who reposted this, either Jeff or XJ. But there was an interview with Mark Daniel. Is that how you pronounce it, or Daniel, right?
Sorry, say it again.
It's pronounced Mark Daniel, right?
I think it's Daignault.
No, Daignault. The G isn't silent. They asked him about playing two bigs, and he's like, and they're like, what kind of issues does that cause? What are the strengths? And he's like, why are you doing it? Or he's like, I would do it no matter what, even if it wasn't working, because we're both great players, right? And you want to get your best players out there, and you want to try and find out as much as you can about the roster, right? And that was particularly striking. And I think it's interesting because when Tibbs got here, right? I mean, you and I may have mentioned once or twice that we weren't thrilled with starting Alfred Payton over Emmanuel Quickly.
Or starting Alfred Payton over like a fucking stop sign.
Yeah, Frank, DSJ, whatever. I will say that the year before, I actually think Alf did help structure Frank's role a little bit. But that year was a clear behind versus Bros, or Quickly it was just lost minutes, right? But at the time, it was like a lot of people said, well, this roster isn't good enough to win a championship anyway, right? He's defining an identity. We can't just harp on every single little adjustment. And I didn't think that was right either. I think, especially when you're the underdog, that's where if you really care about winning every game, you find every inch that you can exploit. And now I think it's, every game counts, especially the last couple of years, every game counts. We can't be fooling around with things that, and if it doesn't work, we get screwed and we lose ground in the standing. Comparing that to a team that has continuity, has a superstar that, again, you do want to maximize, and SGA is probably even a slightly ahead of Brunson, right? The difference between, like, maybe Brunson is still not in that MVP tier right now, where SGA is the front runner. That was a striking difference to me.
Who do you think is going to win the MVP?
Most ballingest player?
Yeah.
Obviously Brunson. Not, what was it, Jermaine Dupri who said that? Yes, Jermaine. Jesus. 5 feet tall Jermaine Dupri.
MVP, most ballingest player.
That's Welcome to Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
It sucks I can't even you can't even quote the New York verse in the remix anymore. They should have gotten someone else to do it. They should have gotten someone else to do it in the first place. But yeah, it was a very striking difference. And again, I think to your point, look, first of all, I would even push back on saying that you could just throw it to Kobe and Duncan. I don't think that was like throughout history, right? The teams that go all the way. This is we can argue that there are going to be people who say the triangle didn't mean much. Phil was full of shit. Jordan is just the greatest. But it is worth noting, part of it was taking Jordan off the ball more, running the triangle, getting Phil has talked about making everyone feel like they're part of the team.
And also just like he's talked about this, but Kerr's talked about this too, where it's like that naturally defenses have to focus on the ball, right? So when you can take a guy off the ball, now the defenses aren't as keyed in on him, right? That's why Steph is such a fucking game-breaking type player, because it's like, wait, we have to focus on this guy even though he doesn't have the ball. Like, this is a nightmare. What the hell are we supposed to do? So,
and it's partly why I think a guy like Kyrie has thrived when he plays next to a wing who is a great playmaker, right? Like he's much more dangerous in Cleveland and next to Luka than he's looked when he's playing in a more stagnant offense. So throughout history, right, it's never been a situation like people love to say at the end of the day, can your best player out will and out tough and get buckets? You always need the rest of the guys to be threats. But I think even in the era, especially in the area of the second apron, and frankly, when the best team is a team that's whole identity, Tatum didn't have the best playoffs. Literally everyone on the floor at all times is a threat. OKC is not quite that, but they are just a historically good defensive team. So, if you're not going to be that, yeah, you need to in order to maximize your stars, you need to empower everyone. And, especially if we're going to be moving forward with Cat or not having, or even Brunson, right? With Brunson, it's probably tough to construct the kind of defense that OKC can. Realistically, you're going to have to really maximize your offense. You still want to get the defense to respectable or like the bare minimum for championship level. But and part of that is going to be finding more creative ways to use Brunson to tax the defense to really spread them thin. And then everything gets amplified, right? And then Mikal Bridges' mid-range shooting gets amplified. And then, right, if the defense is already worrying about 6 different things, and then they have to worry about Josh Hart or Mitchell Robinson crashing the glass, it amplifies that. So you don't even have to lose that identity. But I do think, and I get it again. I think part of it is Tibbs' aversion to turnovers. It's like, I know that if the floor of this possession is Brunson taking a contested ISO shot, it's probably not going to result in transition. It's not going to result in turnover. Like, defense will be fine. And he's good enough at that where we can grind out these games. Same thing with Derrick Rose. Same thing with Jimmy, right? But, when you get to the highest levels, that's not enough. Unless your defense is really historic. And we'll see with OKC. Maybe even then it won't be enough. But
yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to diminish those offenses. It was more the idea of I think defenses are even more on a string nowadays. Like, if you don't have counters on counters and pivots and all these, you need a lot. And to be fair, I think, God, this is the most disgusting thing I'm ever going to say. This current version of the Celtics really makes that standard required to be higher, I think, because when they are locked in, you can't mismatch hunt them. You know what I mean? You can't just be oh, we're just gonna, you have this weak defender here, so I'm just going to mismatch hunt there. You can't do that. You have to
certainly
have
not efficiently enough to keep up with their offense, right?
Right. So. Yeah, you need otherworldly performances at that point. So you need to be able to challenge them in different ways. And I think I want to try and word this carefully. I think the Knicks. So I know I just did this whole thing about how we can't match up with Cleveland. The one thing that always gives me the hope that we can match up with Cleveland is simply that because they play big, if Mitch is healthy, I still feel like they're not a great defensive rebounding team still. I still think there's a world where Mitch gives you an edge, and just very specific to them as an opponent, that makes it competitive and maybe gives the Knicks a puncher's chance for that reason right now. Especially with kind of everything we talked about, the offense, the way it's structured, if Mitch can give you extra possessions and really hurt them on the glass the way we saw him do in 23, I think there's a chance. But like, I don't think what Mitch does matters that much against the Celtics. And that's where the difference is for me. I think what Mitch can do, both on the offensive glass and in terms of his abilities protecting the rim as a drop defender, I think that's where there is a world where he can kind of help you edge a series there. None of that exists with Boston, right? Because they can play 5 out in a way that Cleveland can't. And they can really pull everybody out of the paint. And I don't know, he just can't cover space like that. And we've also, like, they're also just very disciplined about protecting the defensive glass. And they're a big team, right? Like, Jason Tatum is their 3 and sometimes, or they're 4 and sometimes they're 3. They decide to play big, and he's fucking 6'10". So, like, they're just a gigantic team that's very, very hard to totally dominate on the offensive glass. And yeah, I don't see that being a difficult. I just think they're a really, really tough matchup for us. To move the conversation on a little bit, I did want to get to, you talked about this game last night in the Discord. What did you think of OG Anunoby's shot selection and general kind of demeanor through the game?
Yeah, I mean, I just wasn't. That wasn't not a game that's going to go on the OG highlight reel. He honestly looked slow. I don't know if he's going through something. There was like a nice stretch where I think he was energized. There was a lob thrown to, I think it was Bona, and OG looked. I mean, that was vintage OG. He hustled back, made a very nice play to tip the lob up, forced a turnover, and then steps into a transition 3 on the other end. That was the most confident I saw him look, but I saw him force way too many possessions. I mean, I think what's frustrating is it seems that OG is almost more empowered to create and isolate than Bridges. Now, whenever I said, we need to run more pick and rolls for Bridges, he's not a very good passer. I mean, he is Magic Johnson, Steve Nash, and Luka Doncic if they had a baby compared to OG Anunoby. I don't think OG passed once but that was on a very specific, on a drive, easy read. When he decides to isolate on a player, he puts his head down. He's not looking. I think one of the most infuriating ones was he was isolating at the top of the post, or the top of the key, puts his head down, starts to back down his defender. Bridges is wide open. He's cutting. Even for Bridges, that's an easy dunk. OG just completely misses him and takes a horrible fadeaway. I also saw a lot of that from Precious. I don't know what's going on, but it's one thing, like at least with Precious, when he's playing with the other options are Campaign, Deuce, and like Shamit, fine, right? If shot clock's running down, the other guys are not really going to get you a much better shot. I'm not too upset with that. When Precious is taking a fadeaway when Jalen Brunson is on the floor, let alone Bridges, let alone Hart, that really makes you want to tear what little hair I have left out. And with OG, it was a persistent problem too. It could be that maybe he's frustrated in the same way as Bridges, and Bridges is just not in his nature to go to protest that by hijacking the offense. Maybe Tibbs has been sending the message that other guys need to step up. It's not just Jalen, and the way OG has internalized that is less helpful than the way Bridges did, at least for a quarter. But OG should be the 4th, honestly, maybe 5th option on that offense. Like OG's role on offense should largely be cutting, attacking closeouts, shooting threes, and attacking the offensive glass. Occasionally if he gets like a really weak, smaller defender on him, sure, I don't mind him isolating. Like he has that fadeaway. He's reasonably quick, but he doesn't have the advanced ball handling or passing ability where on a team that has better options, frankly, you want him doing much more than that. And that was annoying. And on defense, it was not a vintage performance either. He had a couple of nice steals, and I think there were flashes of stretches with good energy. It's not what you're used to seeing from him. Struggled a bit with Paul George. Although I think Paul George also hit some tough shots on the whole team. I think the first quarter I was like, wow, this guy really is washed. And then he had a pretty nice rest of the game. But a lot of that was fading away, which is surprising that he actually beat OG off the dribble one of the first possessions of the game, right? So it's those kind of things where it wasn't a performance I would write home about for OG, to say the least.
The shot selection was bad. I have not loved his compete level defensively at times. I think more so him just getting back on defense after possessions on offense. That's since and that look, we're talking about 2 games. Okay, so since he come back from injury, 2 games. So it's a very small sample. Also worth noting, his injury was a foot injury. So we don't know how much rehab he was able to do, conditioning work he was able to do while he was kind of resting that foot. So that all needs to be said, and I think it's fair to raise that stuff. The shot selection things concern me for a few reasons. One, this is similar to some issues we saw that we kind of had with him previously this season when he had another extended stretch where we're like, what's going on with this guy? The offense has not been good. His defensive effort has fallen off of it. So that is concerning for that reason. The other thing is, during that time, we had Josh Hart make a couple of comments about guys need to put their egos aside and all wonderful things like that. Obviously, we don't know for sure that it was about OG or if it was about anybody specifically, even. But before he was injured, OG was, he had gotten back to playing more reasonable ball, more kind of back to the good OG that has been great for the Knicks. Now, we know in the past, right, in his past, there have always been rumors that OG wants a bigger role on offense. OG wants this on offense. He wants more touches or whatever it is. So he comes back and he's whatever. We just talked about how he's playing not great and making poor decisions. And yesterday he was jacking up way too much bullshit, especially some of the mid-range takes he took. Now, the defensive effort obviously has not been great. And we've also kind of seen Mikal Bridges go through these ups and downs, right? And at times it feels like his spirit maybe is low or whatever. What I wonder, right, over the last month or so, maybe a little bit longer than that even, honestly, throughout the year, we've seen Josh Hart really have these bizarre defensive games, inattentive defensively, not sticking to his man, not covering his man, falling asleep, making rotations that make no sense, not making rotations, not getting back, all kinds of manners of poor defense and really more than anything, not disciplined defense. Now, he's gotten away with this in large part because he's so productive in terms of his rebounding, in terms of, his ability to grab and go, some of his secondary playmaking in the half court. All of these things have given Josh Hart more than a pass, I would say, because a pass would indicate that he's been some undeserving player throughout this all. But it has maybe got him more leeway than others. And why I think this is important is if I'm OG Anunoby and I'm, look, if you want to say, well, look, he got paid, you should just shut up and deal with it. That's fine. It's not really wrong to feel that way. But he is human, contrary to some of how many people perceive him. He is a human being, not a robot. Now, if I'm him and I see an entire year, mostly, of a lot of Josh Hart, again, poor disciplined defense, all this type of stuff, it might grate on me. It might grate on me if the guy who's doing that shit and is look, and we got to be honest about what it is. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges take on the biggest defensive responsibilities every single night they're on the floor. They have to take on challenges that nobody else in the team does. They are extremely critical to what we do. And it is a thankless task. It is a selfless task. And it's especially selfless and thankless when Carl fucking Anthony Towns is your center, right? And Jalen Brunson is your point guard, who, as no matter how hard he tries, is going to be a bit of a liability. The third guy who's supposed to be helping you do the job is Josh Hart. And for most of this season, I think I'll feel happy to say this. I'm not that I'm happy to say it, but I feel fine saying this. Josh Hart has not carried his weight on the defensive end of the floor at all. And we can sit here and say, well, that's what OG gets paid for. That's what they give up all the picture of Mikal. You cannot play good defense with two guys.
Hart has made up for, I mean, OG, I'll say this, everyone's going to call me out for, OG has not been a great rebounder for the four, and Hart has picked up a lot of that slack on defense.
He definitely has picked up. He definitely has picked up a lot of the slack, but he also is able to get a lot of rebounds because he's not paying attention to his man and he's cheating off the ball to crash the glass. And the point of this I'm trying to make is that the reason this defense, while we had hope, okay, maybe the Knicks, look, they're not going to be a great defense, but they can be above average. They can be top 12, 11, maybe 10. Is you thought we'd have three solid defenders, three good defenders on the wing that you can do all these versatile things with and whatnot. One of those guys is constantly giving teams advantages, leaving shooters open, not paying attention, and that is Josh Hart. And yet, when the Knicks defense struggles, most of the time, the stuff we hear about guys getting criticized is almost always initially, one of the top names listed is Mikal Bridges. Now, another one would be Karl Anthony Towns, but there's always a leeway for him because obviously he's been fucking tremendous on offense, amazing on offense. And then we all hear that, like, there's all this conversation about, like, oh, the Knicks overpaid OG Anunoby. It's not worth that contract. I think Bleacher Report came out some article this week where it was like, which contract's going to look the worst in like 2 years or something like that. And OG's was ranked third or something like that. Now, I don't know if these guys are paying attention to all this shit I'm talking about, but if I'm him, I might get pretty annoyed at a guy who constantly is hanging me out to dry on defense, gets a lot more glory and touches and freedom than I ever get on offense, seemingly is never held to task by the coaching staff for his defensive fuck-ups, and then is maybe talking in public about me saying guys got to put their egos aside. That might piss me off. And I might then at times feel like, fuck it, I got the ball, I'm going to attack. Especially Carl's not here today. Yeah, I'm taking a shot here. I don't give a fuck. I might react like that. And I'm not trying to be dramatic because I don't think this is like, as much as I just painted this picture, like, I don't actually think this is that big of like a huge fucking source of turmoil, even if it is the case. But it is something that I wonder about, like, because I see it. Like, I see yesterday there was a play in the fourth quarter. Brunson makes an incredible layup. Knicks are up 94-85. Awesome, 9-point lead. Looks like, okay, finally we can pull away. Josh Hart's lollygagging back on defense, not guarding anybody, not just fucking like he's not paying attention to anything. He's not aware of anything. And Mikal Bridges is pointing at him like, go to this guy right now. Doesn't go to him. They get a fucking open corner in three, and it's a 94-88 game. Like, and then, then Josh taps his shoulder, raises his hand. It's my bad. I'm sorry. Like, this has gone on for too long this year. These are really, really bad habits that he's forming. And the problem, those bad habits that he's forming have consequences for others. And they have consequences because guys have to cover to rotate for you. But you know what? They might not cover to rotate for you. If one, they're fucking annoyed because like, what the fuck? How many times are you going to do the same fucking shit? And two, if they're like, are you going to rotate for me? If I go out there for you to cover for your ass, are you going to have my back too? Because this year so far defensively, Josh Hart I think this is pretty easily his worst defensive stretch since he got to New York. This is the worst defense he's played over an extended period since he got to New York. And last year when he had those some shaky defensive stretches, they're a lot more understandable given, he was playing 4 full-time half the time. Like, right? He's being asked to do like
he's also playing like 46 minutes a game by the end of the year when everyone, was injured.
So you can understand that. You can understand that. But when this year to me, it's less acceptable. And I can understand why and OG Anunoby, it doesn't matter what he's getting paid and all that's it. He can look at that and get annoyed, and how that can manifest on the floor in terms of like, there are times where we've talked about OG Anunoby and we're like, the defensive effort tonight, man, could be better, right? It should be better. It's not been great. It's not been good. He should take better shots here. But like, all of this is to say, if Josh Hart has this kind of long leash with Thibodeau, OG could affect his effort. It could affect his decision making on the floor. And I think he's also peeved in general about not being involved in the offense. Like, I do think that is a reality. And, I don't know if Mikal Bridges feels the same way. I would imagine he might, not necessarily in terms of Josh Hart, but just not being more and more involved offensively than he is. And I just wonder how that always plays into these guys' compete level at a certain point on defense, where you're like, this is thankless. Like, I just exist out here to like be the servant to other guys, but if there's no if these guys aren't even helping me, then what the fuck am I like? Then that's shitty too. And
wouldn't you argue though, when he isos and takes mid-range pull-ups, he's kind of trying to be the servant?
Yeah, good point. But yeah, that's I don't know. I don't feel like I don't even necessarily think I don't even know that this is true. It could just be as simple as OG's rusty coming off of a extended break and he just had a stupid shot selection night. It could really just be that simple. But we've just heard like that egos comment the couple of times Josh has said that earlier in the year. The fact that it kind of feels like it was maybe about OG and or Mikal. And then comparatively, kind of the glory that Hart gets, right? And I understand why he gets it, because he's made huge plays and he has a knack for making big plays and kind of not just big plays, but momentum swinging plays, splash plays, so to speak. I can just see how that would be a source of frustration for a guy like OG.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that excuse is just hijacking the offense.
No, it doesn't.
I do think it's interesting. It's interesting to think about when your job is thankless, right? I mean, think about this, right? Whenever you hear secondaries, even the best corners, they want to play with a great defensive line. Because what's fun, right? Even if you're capable, right? The best cornerbacks can actually run around and hold off for 5-6 seconds and generate coverage sacks. Do you think they have more fun doing that with a shitty defensive line? Or do you think they have more fun playing 500 because the quarterback is having to throw a desperation heave and it's a duck and they can rack up those picks? Do you think for OG it's more fun to I mean, we've seen him, right? When he gets a steal, he wants to get out in transition and dunk. And he's great at doing that. Doesn't get as many opportunities when you're constantly just covering and rotating. And same with Bridges, right? Bridges, we criticize his effort getting over screens. Do you think Bridges enjoys being able to hop passing lanes and to start a fast break more? Or do you think he enjoys having to go through 260-pound motherfucker's chest?
Well, and to the point about Bridges screens, like, because Cat is a bad defender, obviously in most screen coverages, like he's not a good one, but he's especially bad in drop. Teams know that the Knicks play drop, and what are they doing? They're running Mikal Bridges through like 700 fucking screens a game. At some point, you're like, dude, this fucking sucks. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is fucking brutal. Like, this is the worst thing ever. And yeah, that's annoying because you're like, I have to do this shit, and Josh gets to like, hang out, crash the glass, and then gets to go grab and go and do all kinds of cool bullshit. Like, what the? And this motherfucker won't space the floor, so I gotta stay spaced out. And like, it's I'm sure that like, dude, these guys are human, right? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Coaching Fred had me tackling 250-pound motherfuckers. I don't do that shit. But
said I had good feet. I should play cornerback.
Side note, that Rick Pitino speech, like, that needs to be done. I don't know if anyone saw it, but where he's like, just like, it's literally sounded so much like that Game of Inches speech. And
it's supposed to be hard. Who told you life is fucking easy?
I just need Rick Pitino to say, "You're 6 inches in front of your face." So I mean,
that's what living is.
I think he said that was. I think that was a direct quote from both too, right? That's what life is. And so you can see, and I think you've seen in basketball too, right? I know this isn't your favorite Nick, but the year the Knicks had the 2 seed, or yeah, it was a 2 seed that year, and they lost to Indiana in 2012, 2013. They had, I think, the third ranked defense, despite giving heavy minutes to obviously Melo, older players like Jason Kidd. I mean, J.R. Smith had probably, certainly in New York, his best defensive season. And to that point, you can make an argument he was better in Cleveland. But it was really held together by Tyson Chandler. And part of the reason that team fell apart is Tyson Chandler at one point seemed to check out and was like, fuck this. So you can, I mean, that when you're asked, and you can say, well, that's your job. That's why we didn't pay you. You don't do much on offense. You get that. And again, this goes back to, you know, making everyone feel like a part of the team. That's something, again, I have just read some of this stuff more recently, or like some of his quotes, but that's something Phil Jackson emphasized. That's something I don't think Popovich explicitly emphasized, but everyone on his team, not just had, like, even guys like Bruce Bowen were involved beyond just spotting up, right?
Well, everybody talks about this. Like Kerr Talks about this, right? Mike D'Antoni talks about this. It's like the ball has energy, right? Guys want to feel involved. Like I mean, again, not to just overdo football stuff, but like, are you more likely as a wide receiver to block if you get a couple catches? Probably. Probably. Like it's the same concept, you know. It's if you are more involved in something, even if, like, this is what I'm saying. I don't even know if it means OG or Mikal. It doesn't need to be about them getting more shots or but get them involved. Like, get them more touches where they're involved in whatever actions you're trying to run. And it doesn't feel like that, right? But like Josh gets those touches, obviously, in a way that they don't. And obviously Brunson and Cat always will. So it's a weird thing. I can't. I feel like.
And also on the other side, to your earlier point, right? If you're Josh Hart, I mean, look, one guy I'm sure they don't have resentment for. Look, you mentioned Brunson isn't an all-world defender. He's been pretty great of late. I think his compete, like, if I was OG, I don't think I would be upset with him, because especially for a superstar.
Brunson takes charges and he's like your fucking lead guard. You know what I mean?
He
like,
also he does things like fight Porzingis on switches, right? Front the post, right? He's been actually really good at those things. Better, I think, than maybe even guys like Hart, to be honest, of late. So I think you can, and I hope Mitch helps a little bit here, where with that back line, maybe OG and Bridges can be a little more aggressive in passing lanes, right? With, you know, switching up the pick and roll coverages. Maybe they don't have to do the same things guarding the point of attack. Maybe Hart playing more seriously at the point of attack, or maybe if Deuce gets more minutes, that alleviates them a little bit more. You know, it's tough to say, but yeah, I mean, I think thankless was a word you used, and, you know, people will always point, how thankless can it be when you have, you know, what is it, 8 figures coming into your bank account every year?
212 and a half, or whatever, $212.5 million contract.
Yeah,
and
even Bridges is only 18 million a year. Well, talk to us, it's not thankless, right? But
and look, like, with all the shit that's going on in this country, like, I'm not saying we need to pour our hearts out for these guys that are getting paid at this level, but like, it's more just to understand on a human level, when you're working towards a common goal, like, you're not sitting on the court thinking about your fucking paycheck, right? Like, you are just operating as a team, and you want to feel like everybody that's on the court with you is working in the same direction, working towards the same goal, and doing it in a way that benefits everybody, right? And I can see how there are times with some of the shit Josh Hart has done this year where that could be very frustrating for other players on the team. And they're like, and that can, and it's, again, it doesn't even need to be like they're mad at Josh Hart. It could also just be as simple as like, it can affect your vibe. It can affect your mood. It can affect your energy level. And to the point you're making about Brunson, right? There are definitely times where I'll watch OG or Mikal, and they're like, oh fuck, Cat's not gonna do anything here. That sucks. Like they know, like you can see it. And that's probably really frustrating because you're also like, Cat, you're fucking huge, dude. Can you just put your hand up on defense? Is that a thing? You're like, your shoulders work, right? Let's get your hand up on defense here.
Sounds familiar, huh?
Yeah. They should have Cat watch. Tibbs needs to do the love and basketball punishment to Cat in practice.
You're not allowed to put your hands up anymore. It's the opposite.
No, you have you have to put your hands up. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I don't have I could be totally reaching, but I just think about that stuff when I see games like that from OG, where it's like even as I'm watching, I'm like, he has to know this shot is fucking stupid, right? Like with Precious, I just assume that he is so oblivious to whatever the fuck is going on offense or in general a lot of times that it's not intentional. It's just Precious being Precious. With OG, I'm like, you have to know this shot is dumb. Like, you have to know this decision right here is stupid that you're making, and you're just doing it anyway because you're like, I want to get my shot up. And we saw examples of that earlier in the year, and I feel like those comments from Hart were pointed somewhat in that direction, you know? So I don't know what, it's just, but I do fundamentally believe all of this ties back to, like, there just seems to be a lot of lack of accountability for stuff on this team right now. And even in a win yesterday, you saw it, and game gets tighter than it should be. And Josh Hart's like throwing some of the dumbest passes you've ever seen in your life at moments where you had a chance to kind of extend the lead, put the team away. Look, I want to be clear because I feel like I'm trying to make this all about Josh Hart. Cat's done shit like that too. I mean, OG's taking stupid shots. That's part of it too, right? Mikal's floating through games at times. That's part of it too. Like, it's not just one guy, but in terms of the dynamic of how it all works together, I think it's interesting to look at the players' roles and how that can kind of affect guys' energy. And, I guess the best way for me to put it is, if you want to say Josh Hart is asked to do so much, so you have to give him some leeway on those things, it's a little bit unfair to me then to not extend the same courtesy. Like, we say this for Brunson and Cat and stuff too, right? It's like, well, look, these guys are scoring and doing so much on offense that you kind of have to live with what they're giving up on defense at times. And one, you can't selectively apply that logic. You have to extend that courtesy to everybody on the team. And for me, where it ultimately gets to is, you can't actually expect that courtesy. You cannot extend that courtesy. The standard has, as Mike Tomlin says, the standard is the standard. And the standard in Pittsburgh is first round exits. But like, that's really the truth though. The standard to win is, yeah, certain guys get sliders in terms of like, I need this from you, but you got to hit certain thresholds. You got to give me X, Y, and Z. And that's why your role, right? That's why Josh Hart's role on defense is a less important function than Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby. But if he's even failing at that, then he's not carrying his weight. And that needs to be addressed. And, when certain players are not doing what they're supposed to do, and it's not addressed, and it doesn't matter who the fuck it is. It doesn't matter if it's Brunson. It doesn't matter if it's Josh Hart. It doesn't matter if it's Karl-Anthony Towns. It doesn't matter if it's Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby campaign. If you let that stuff slide and let things kind of go as they go, that's a pretty slippery slope. And I do think the Knicks are. I really am watching this team this year, and it feels like they're a little slippery slope. Like, why is it still happening? Why do we still have possessions in transition where nobody knows what the fuck is going on? Why is, Karl-Anthony Towns not putting up his hands to contest a shot for a month? Why is OG Anunoby taking the stupidest mid-range shots possible every time he touches the ball? Why is Precious Achiuwa? He took a fucking jump hook yesterday. I want a turnaround hook fade thing over Drummond with like 9 seconds left on the shot clock. Real possession that happened. Why is Mikal Bridges never attacking the rim and taking such a heavy dose of mid-range pull-ups, right? Like, again, you can do this for everybody, but the fact that we can do it for everybody is the point. As good as this team,
as hard as it gets.
yeah, exactly. Why did Bush knock down them towers? But like, why? And this is for I can bring up something for basically everybody, every one of the starters at bare minimum, and Precious, because apparently, now I think there have been stretches where Brunson's played like an asshole. We've talked about it before
Not
at
in a
various
while.
points. Not a while, but I'm just saying, like, you can bring this up over the course of the season with everybody, and it just feels like 30-20. Like, what are you guys complaining about? This team is really good, but you're trying to win a championship, and to win a championship, you cannot cut corners. You cannot, he can slide a little bit here because he did that thing, and he's doing this, and it can't be that way. It cannot be that way. Like, this is how, and I tweeted this the other day. This team to me right now has all the hallmarks of a team that you play the wrong team in the first round, a team that's disciplined, a team that's going to compete super hard, all those type of things that's just going to keep fucking working, that they could be looking at an upset. Like, really, like, I think if you put them in a series right now, put them in a series today against the Detroit Pistons, would you say you're like going into that series like, yeah, I mean, there's no way the Pistons team is going to beat us? I wouldn't.
I would still, but I think I would have said before the season anything less than a sweep would be disappointing in that. And now I'm like, yeah, I could see it going 6. Just because that is a team that has had better attention to detail.
And they're playing like, I'm of the belief that you cannot, like, unless you're like the Kobe Shaq Lakers, right, which is its own fucking thing. You can't, or like the KD Warriors teams. You have overwhelming superior talent. You cannot just turn it on. You cannot just, okay, now I'm going to do all of these, fine detailed things. I'm just going to do them now. It's not how it works. It is not how it works. You have to be working on that stuff through the season. And
I do agree, but it's worth noting the Knicks have generally taken care of business against teams below 500. And I don't know what the Pistons record is, but that is the kind of team the Knicks have generally taken. They're actually 7 games above 500. So
yeah, Pistons are good. They're 1-8 in a row. They're the longest winning streak in the league. They beat Boston by 20 points. By 20 points. We fucking lose to Boston by 13, and I'm like, oh, there's some silver linings here. Actually, if you look at it, I
mean, is it fair to say that the Knicks have gotten the Celtics A game in a way that other teams just don't?
Of course, but this isn't like they're playing them on some random fucking Tuesday on a back-to-back. These primetime national games. Like, if you're not geared up for that, if you're not ready for that challenge, then what the fuck are you doing out here? Like, they haven't even been prepared to meet that level of intensity, that physicality. And to be fair, honestly, both the losses they have to the Pistons, they're because they did not match the intensity. They did not match the level required. And they do this. Like, look, I agree to your point that they've been able to take care of business for the most part. But look at the way they're taking care of business lately. Overtime win against the Hawks at home. Overtime win against the Bulls at home. You need Brunson to go God mode again down the stretch against Philly. Like a depleted Philly team that is, again, on a long losing streak and a terrible downward spiral. Like, you're not taking care of business the way that you want to take care of business, right? And again, you go back to the Pistons games that we lost to them. These are games where it's like the Knicks, they make a run and it's like, all right, they're going to roll over now. And it's like, nope, not going to roll over. They're actually going to keep fighting. And it's like, if you are not willing to compete and fight for 48 minutes and you don't have the discipline, you haven't had the discipline all year to do that. And then on top of it, your coach is not using the tools at his disposal to hold guys accountable, right? Like, how would you hold a guy like Josh Hart accountable, right? Is it you bench him? No, obviously not. You don't have that luxury. How do you hold,
take away his breast milk?
Yeah, that would be one.
This podcast.
Don't let him watch the Commanders anymore. But how do you hold a guy like OG Campbell when he's taking stupid ass shots and not doing his best on defense, or Mikal when he's kind of like limply going through a game, right? You have players that you can use on your bench to at least send the fucking message, right? Like, hey, for example, that Boston game on Sunday. Do you know who came in and immediately played better defense with more physicality, more heart than any of these guys? Landry Shamet.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Deuce. But yeah,
Deuce,
actually, Shamit's defense was good yesterday, too, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, Deuce is obvious, right? That's the guy that he should be using at any given time. Like, if you see any of those guys slip, Deuce can easily come in and play with the other two anyway. So that's what you should do. And that's why he should get more minutes than he's getting. But my point is, Landry Shamet came in that game and he played with a level of urgency and he met the physicality of the game at a level that I don't know what the fuck the starting guys were doing to start it, but they weren't doing that. OG didn't do it. Josh Hart didn't do it. Mikal Bridges certainly didn't do it. They didn't do it. So you have a game where Landry Shamet comes in and he hits 2 threes. He's actually competing. He's actually fighting. He's showing you an effort and a level of competitiveness that you're not getting from those guys. That is the time you leave him in the game. And look, maybe it had the desired effect anyway because they came out in the second half and were better. I mean, they didn't come out in the second half immediately and play better. They didn't happen until what? Until Deuce came in. So, again, that says something. But like, that's how you send that message to those guys. Again, I'm not talking about benching them permanently. You can't do that. You don't have that opportunity. But you're not even using the tools at your disposal. You're not even trying. Because you're seeing, as the season has gone on, you're not seeing an improvement in those things. We've seen glimpses, we've seen stretches, but then it regresses back. It's not good enough. It's not good enough, and it has to start from the top, and that comes from players themselves feeling accountable to each other. And I don't know if you saw the story it was from The Athletic. They talked about like the Blazers and a meeting that Chauncey Billups had with the team. And he talked about how like he pointed out some clip from some other fucking game. I don't remember who it was. I think it was maybe the Pistons or the Warriors or something. And he talked about like, hey, look, they're calling each other out for, hey, you fucked up this, and they're having an argument, and then it's over. It's over because you're all fighting towards the same goal. And he's like, are you guys willing to call each other out on your fuck ups? Because that's what it takes. And like, that's what accountability is. The accountability is being able to call people out, your peers, your teammates, your coaches being able to call you out and not respond as a personal affront, but as like all right, he's right. I gotta do better. Like, who is there?
And there's a good balance, right? That's not saying you have to be Draymond Green and just
you don't
verbally
need to be
abusing
right.
your teammates, right? But there's a fair balance. Sorry, go ahead. What you're gonna ask?
No, that's it. Like it's. Are you gonna? Like, where is that on this team? Who is doing that on this team? Because right now, like, I think Brunson, to your point about him kind of like locking in here over the last few weeks, I think he's trying to set the example, right? He's trying to like show the way, so to speak. And even then, like, he's not perfect. He's going to fuck up. But I think you can see that he's been more consistent in that sense recently. But who's going to challenge other guys? Who's going to call them out? And again, like you said, it doesn't need to be like an asshole way. It can just be like, yo, Josh, gonna fucking need you to like actually lock in here, man. Tag the roll man. Go rotate out to the shooter.
Well,
pick up your man in transition. Like,
my guess is Brunson does that. Not with Hart maybe as much, but I do think he can. I think he energizes Bridges. But he's not. I don't think he's going to be the guy that's going to like call out guys in like a public forum that way, right? When I say public, I mean the locker room.
Yeah.
But Josh, I think, is willing to do that. The problem with Brunson is he walks the walk. He maybe doesn't talk the talk enough. And the opposite may be true for Hart, right? Hart is the guy who's very vocal and always getting on guys, but that rings a little hollow if you're not backing it up, right?
Right. And that's where I wonder, like, how that plays with a guy like OG at times where he's like, bro, I don't need to hear from you. Like, like you are not the messenger for this. And then ultimately, like, if your coach can't do this, like, or is he doing it? I don't know. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? None of us know. Is Tibbs telling them and they're not getting the message or they're not listening or whatever, which is its own problem. But it has to start somewhere, and it has to start soon because they're playing Memphis tomorrow. If they come out against Memphis and put up the fucking efforts they've been putting up recently, they're going to get smacked. Like, I know that they smoked Memphis, obviously, like last time we played, which is another thing to consider. Like, Memphis is probably going to be very fucking motivated for this. But yeah, That's it. No, those are my concerns. All right, Stacey, anything you want to plug before you get out of here?
Nothing to plug.
All right, I don't need to plug. Just check out all the work at Strickland, pods, recaps, all that good stuff. Thank you to our sponsor, Bet Online. That is our show for today. I hope everybody enjoyed, and we will see you. Me and Press recording Saturday, so we'll have the pod up for you that day. Peace.